From fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Pod Therapy. Real people, real problems, real therapists. If you have any questions you'd like to ask or advice you'd like to give, come on over to podtherapy.net and join our conversation. We're back from a week off. Not really a week off. We recorded episode 13, but it was
unusable.
Completely unusable. And now, broadcasting from Level 9 Studios, that guy is Dr. Jim Jobin. I'm Nick Tangeman. It's time for some Pod Therapy.
I love that this is now episode 14, and episode 13 just doesn't exist. And we could have just titled this one episode 13, and that way there would have been consistency. But I appreciate it.
Why live the lie?
Why live the lie? Call it what it is. Put it in the trash heap of history. But now the people want to know, Nick, what happened while Jim was gone?
But how perfect is it that it's 13 of all numbers?
Yeah. Well, actually, I was thinking about this. So for the listener, Jim, went to Newport Beach, California over last week for my kids' spring break. Had a great time. Made a lot of sandcastles, a lot of fun. And I left Nick in charge of the pod. And
Bad move.
Bad move. Once upon a time, Nick once brought up this conversation of, if we are Simon and what is it?
Simon and Garfunkel.
Simon and Garfunkel. Which one of us is Simon and which one is Garfunkel? And I never knew what the hell he was talking about. But apparently one of them was actually talented. The other one kind of hung out. Yeah, according to Nick. I always enjoyed their work. But I think now we know. Now we know who's Garfunkel, Nick. Because you tried it on your own and you felt it was unusable.
Mm-hmm. Takes a big man to admit when he's wrong.
It does.
And I am not a big man.
You're a giant among men for the failures, so conspicuous. But it's appropriate that episode 13 was the one that just disappears because in Las Vegas, and the listener might not remember this, but we are Las Vegas therapists, Viva Las Vegas, and any hotel you go to, there is no 13th floor. Right. And that's something a lot of people don't know is you go in the elevator, there is no number 13.
I don't think that's a Vegas thing, actually. I think that's a hotel thing. There's a lot of
I think that's a Vegas thing.
No, I've been to hotels in like Chicago.
That don't have a floor 13? Really?
Floor. Yeah.
Well, I'd be interested. If you're out there and you're from somewhere else, tell us the deal. But I know at least in Las Vegas, nobody wants to be on floor 13 because it's associated with being unlucky and it's a freaking casino.
Right.
I don't want to blame all my losses on that floor. So every hotel gets rid of it because people will specifically say, don't put me on the 13th floor. Like it's all the superstition. So they'll just go, yeah, no problem, we won't.
But there still is a 13th floor.
There is. Yeah. Yeah. So
it's
not like there's actually a blank.
Don't put me on the 14th either.
Yeah, don't put me, yeah. I'm on to your trickery.
I know your little tricks.
So to increase our luck and ensure that nobody that listens to this podcast is less lucky, we have gotten rid of episode 13. So now you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, actually, I would like to say that the episode hasn't been completely destroyed.
Yeah, it still
does
exist.
It's in a vault.
Yeah.
And we're willing to sell it for the right price.
Like the Wu-Tang Clan did.
Right.
Yeah. So if you would like to place a bid on Nick's horrible Pod 13 without Jim, and actually our engineer Scott jumped in and tried to bail him out.
Scott was the only saving grace of that episode.
Scott jumped in.
It's actually probably usable because
of Scott. Yeah, so he tried to bail Nick out. But if you would like to bid on it, opening bid, I'm going to say a solid 50 cents. Okay? It's time to make some money on this podcast. So we'll open the bidding at 50 cents, and you can bid on our Facebook page or on our Twitter. So, yeah, go nuts.
Yeah, there we go.
50 cents, I'll sell you the episode. I'll just email it to you. So,
yeah. What will you do with all that money?
Yeah, I'll go buy an ice cream. So we are back, and we've got some awesome questions, some really good stuff that's been written in, and can't wait to get to it. So, Nick, do you mind if I launch with the first one?
Go.
All right, let's do it. The first question is titled, How Can I Learn to Like Myself? Hey guys, first of all, loving the podcast. Your advice is always so spot on. I think he's talking to me. I think he meant Jim. Yeah. Second of all, if you decide to answer my question, please don't use my name. Thank you.
Jessica, we promise we will not use your name.
I think it's a dude.
No, I think it's a woman.
Okay, so hopefully her name really wasn't Jessica.
I'm 99% sure it wasn't.
Okay, got it. So definitely we will not use your name, Ivanka. All right, so this year I have been involved in a sports club in university, and I've really been enjoying it. Everyone in the club is really nice to me, and I try to be just as friendly to them. The only problem is they're constantly talking about big group events that they've all been to, like going out for drinks or partying. And it's obvious they all hang out together, but they don't invite me. They'll have these conversations right in front of my face with zero awareness that it might bother me, but it leaves me feeling really left out, uncomfortable and awkward. Obviously, I can't force them to want to hang out with me, but it started to make me feel really unwelcome and anxious, even going to the club meetings. I've been to almost every single one since the start of school year, and I'm the only active member who's not been invited. So a lack of attendance isn't the problem. My question is, how can I reframe this shame and rejection so it doesn't hurt so much? I know it's silly, but it's really affecting my confidence and making me feel inherently unlikable. I've tried researching what I could be doing wrong, but all the self-help articles suggest that I must be a self-involved person who doesn't show an interest in people, and I'm just not like that at all. I'm not sure what I can do differently. That doesn't involve actively changing who I am completely. It makes me so self-conscious and upset. I'm done trying to understand what I've done wrong. I just want to find a way to feel okay about myself again. Please help.
I mean, who hasn't been there? I've experienced this too.
Right.
Actually, in college,
When
kind
you
of
were
a
British
similar
schoolgirl.
Yes.
Yeah.
Back in the day.
Back before my life changes.
Back when life was good. But we've all been there. Been part of a club or something. You kind of start realizing that all these folks are meeting and you're not really invited to things. And that is a strike to your confidence quite a bit. But I like actually how you've worded this question, because it almost kind of sounds like your question isn't really geared towards how can I get more active in this. Your question in one of the paragraphs was, how can I reframe this?
Yeah.
That's
good insight.
Absolutely. That's amazing insight.
Yeah.
So what that tells me right there is that you're looking at this, you have a general understanding of kind of the cognitive behavioral theory of, the way that I look at a situation is going to affect how I feel about it and how I behave towards it. So you're looking at reframing this thing. So for the listener, how to reframe, essentially what we're talking about is how to take something and look at it in a completely different context. Looking at it from a perspective that's going to be more helpful and productive and create a better emotional response.
Yes.
I think first off, I think trying to depersonalize some of this. It becomes very easy when you're in a situation like this to take everything as being a reflection of you. And maybe that's not the case. Maybe it's a reflection of the group. It could be a reflection of a lot of different things. It doesn't necessarily have to be pinpointed directly at you.
Right. One of the things that's interesting about that, Nick, is she says it's a sports team, right? And so she's joined it this year, and they probably have a history, especially if you're, a freshman or a sophomore coming into college. And, these are juniors and seniors, folks that have been through some stuff together. They've traveled together. They've gone through ups and downs together. There's a camaraderie. And sometimes in those kinds of situations, you kind of have to earn your right to be a part of that. And for them to reveal it out loud that they do stuff, it could be mean, but I don't detect the writer thinks that way. She just sort of says, no, they're pretty open about it. So it almost appears to be something where it's not an exclusion thing. It's more like you're on the road toward inclusion. Like you're not quite part of this yet, but you're on your way. And one thing I really enjoy about this writer's, tone is she's not buying the presentation of the false idea of herself. She's reading self-help stuff, which, I won't speak for Nick, but for me, I choke on a lot of that. Like, I feel like it has the appearance of psychology without the power of it. And so a lot of it isn't that good. I just feel like it's speculative. But she's rejecting the central premise, which is like a lot of self-help says that I must be self-concerned and obsessed and people are trying to signal that they're excluding me. And she's kind of saying, no, like I know myself. I'm pretty self-aware. Like I'm actually pretty nice and likable and this isn't me. So what's going on? And I like that she's challenging that right out of the gate, realizing that's not who I am. And now I'm looking at it and saying, but I am struggling with this and I am starting to feel, is it me? Am I unlikable? What's going on? So good job at least for having that true self-awareness. I know who I am, but something about me is not being communicated to this group. So my piece of advice that I'll jump in with is sometimes when you feel incongruent, I know who I am, but other people are not catching who I am and something is disconnecting. I don't want to question so much who you are or who they are. I want to question the perceptions, right?
Right.
What messages do I send and how can I become self-aware about how I'm communicating myself? How do I send out signals about who I am? And are other people getting those signals accurately? It's a good question to ask.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I was kind of thinking the same thing too. I mean, in the situations that I've been in, I know a lot of people who are just kind of quiet and shy, but they don't send the appearance of being quiet or shy. They send the appearance of being stuck up.
Right.
You know, I've known people like that, and I've talked to other people like, oh, so and so is so stuck
They
up.
think
and
they're
like,
better than us.
Like, no, they're just quiet. That's
right.
Not, you know, so a big part of it is perception. I mean, that's we could argue that's all of it.
Sure,
all of it is just perception.
It's just perception.
And there's probably a lot of little things that happen that you may not be aware of. I've been in that situation where things that I was doing that I wasn't aware that I was doing was sending a message to other people that, well, don't even bother Nick with this. He doesn't seem the type. He doesn't seem like he'd be interested. He doesn't, you know, so we don't even bother even asking. Right.
Yes, that's a really good point, Nick. And that actually might be, and we don't have all the data, but that could be what's happening here is the other girls might be saying, hey, you know, don't bother inviting her because she's probably the type that would decline and, you know, we don't want to deal with that. And in reality, she's like, gosh, I wish they would, but she's too polite and quiet to sort of self-invite, you know, and put herself out there. And so now we're at the standoff. But that's, I think, the answer to the first question. She said, how can I reframe the shame and rejection? I think what I hear Nick and I saying is we invite you to reframe it as this is a perception issue, not an essence issue. This is not they're rejecting me. It's I am sending signals in communication that give them a false impression of my willingness to participate or my eagerness to participate, and they are not, as a group, sending that message back to me.
Right. So how would you address that, Jim? If that were you, how would you do it?
Honestly, my first piece of advice, I would tag one of those girls that I feel the most comfortable with, and I would ask them for some honest feedback. And I've done this with Nick lots of times. We've worked in organizations together, and I'm always trying to like look around and say, hey, am I receiving from other people that I give off the impression of something I don't want to be? And so I've pulled Nick aside before and said, hey, can you give me some honest feedback? Be my mirror for me. You know, check my teeth for broccoli, you know, personality-wise. Am I coming off a certain way? And he'll look at it from an objective point of view and say, you know, Jim, yeah, sure. In this situation, I can see where people got that view of you. I've known you longer. I know you in other capacities, so I know that's not who you are. I have more data to work with than them, but they just get these glimpses of you, and sure, they take this impression away. But having that person to bounce ideas off of and pulling one of those teammates aside and saying, hey, you know, Samantha, can I ask you some, you know, for some advice for a second? Yeah, sure. What's up? You know, we get along. So listen, sometimes I get the feeling that I'm off-putting or that I'm sending the signal to the team that I'm not interested in being part of the friendship. Is there anything I'm doing or saying that's sending that signal? And that's super helpful because a lot of people appreciate you coming to them with that. They feel honored. They feel respected. And it's very honest, you know, and they tend to want to tell you, actually, yeah, you know, this is what you kind of say or do that, sure, other people like you, but they're not sure if you'd be a part of this.
Right. That'd be good. Absolutely. And, you know, we were talking about this actually ahead of time before recording, and I'm going to credit Scott here with some great feedback.
Yeah.
Scott had the idea, well, why don't you invite them to do something?
Yes, that's a great note.
You know, take the initiative and get involved and say, you know, come up with a plan for the weekend, something you're going to do, and invite, you know, anybody on the team. Hey, you want to come hang out? Let's go do this together. And then that will give you kind of some feedback right there, you know. If some people are like, oh, yeah, okay, that sounds good, then that gives you some comfort right there, knowing that, oh, yeah, I was kind of misreading this whole thing. They are interested.
Yeah.
And the other thing, too, to think about is it might just catch them off guard. They may be in complete shock. And like, oh, well, Sally is asking us to do this. This seems kind of odd. I didn't know she was
actually, and that's a possibility, right? Because it's possible that they just don't like you, and I don't think that's really the best explanation. But in case it is, here's a way to avoid that. Take this idea of inviting them to something, but instead of inviting the whole group in one big announcement, like in the locker room, identify one of them. Pick one of them who seems the most approachable. Ask just that individual, hey, do you want to go out and get some dinner or go grab a movie on Saturday or whatever? And if you can get one of them to buy in, now you leverage that to get more of them. So then you come approaching and go, hey, me and Becky are going to head to the movies this weekend. Would any of you guys like to come? And now it's not me. You're choosing me. It's I've already got one of you. I've picked off a weak member of the herd. And now I'm sort of tying myself into this too. Right. So that's a way to kind of a little bit more neutrally approach that.
Yeah, and a lot of this has to do with approachability.
Yes.
You know, like I know a lot of folks who just are not approachable.
Yeah.
Usually because of things that they can't control and are not aware of. Some folks that I know that are just like, they're tall and they have that resting bitch face.
Yeah.
Where it's like, and because of that, people just think like, oh, I don't want to talk to that person. But you go and talk to them and they're the nicest people in the world, you know?
Yeah. And guys, for all listeners everywhere, this comes back to something I want to challenge you to do. I want you to, from time to time, check in with other people and ask what impression they have of you. What was their first impression of you? How did they originally get to know you? Because we put off these vibes that we don't even realize that we do. You know, my personal vibe is obnoxious. And so like people's first impression of Jim is he's obnoxious and really narcissistic. And over time they realize, yes, he is those things and he's tolerable in small doses. So it takes time, but I'm self-aware of that. And so like when I'm introducing myself to new people or something, I can kind of control for those factors and intentionally take action to try to make sure I don't come off over the top or whatever.
Yeah.
And I only have that insight because people have told me and I've asked about it.
I remember when I first met you.
Yeah.
I remember when you left my office. I remember thinking to myself,
what an idiot.
Did I just buy a used car?
Yeah. You know, it's funny because I remember the very first time we ever met, we were in the same office and we had a patient come in that day who was in big trouble for doing something wrong she had relapsed or something to that effect. And I was trying to get therapeutic alliance with her. And so I immediately leapt into this whole, hey, it's not your fault kind of thing. And you were just like looking at me like, what? Like, I'm trying to keep this person in line. Like, they're breaking the rules. And you're coming here like Johnny Nice Guy, like bad cop, good cop. I don't even know this guy. And I thought about it afterward. I was like, God, I probably should have like gotten to know Nick. Where I just dive in and take control of his client here and excuse them from all culpability. But anyway, also last piece of advice, if you do feel alone, Nick and I are totally willing to travel. If you want to buy our tickets, we will come out to England. I assume you're from England because you refer to it as university.
Could be Canada.
We will not do that. But if you're in somewhere fun, we're happy to come out and we'll be your friends.
Yeah.
Then you could be like, oh, these famous podcasters are here. Would you guys like to hang out with me? And then all of your squad will be like, oh my God, yeah, we totally love Pod Therapy. I can't believe you know those guys. So just know that we're prepared to help out. You know, we remember the small people. So yeah.
I'd love to live in a world in which, in which
anybody gave a damn.
That we are the thing that gets people friends.
You guys know Nick and Jim? Well, I mean, yeah. They've read my question. But thank you so much for writing, and thank you for whatever country you're from for spreading the good news of Pod Therapy.
Definitely.
I hope that more people will from your town. So
right back
question.
again.
Yes, please.
Our next question: is my wife obsessed with her phone? Great show, guys. Thanks for everything. So, Time Magazine just released another article related to smartphone use and how it can lead to relationship problems. I agree with the article. I feel like my wife is constantly on her phone. I try to let her be, but sometimes I get jealous and make needy remarks like, "What's on your phone?" or "Who are you texting?" among other things. I have expressed my concern to her, but it seems to annoy her. What are your thoughts about how to address this? Thanks again.
Oh, that's a great question. I resent this guy's writing because I am the wife in this one, like how his wife is obsessed. I am totally that guy. Like, oh my gosh, Reddit has ruined me. Like Reddit and Twitter. Like I am, just all day. I'm constantly doing it at the office too. I'm running into Nick's office. I'm like, look at this cat video. And he's like, dude, like I'm talking somebody off the ledge right now. Like this is not the time. And I'm like, okay, but real quick. But it's hard, man, because I get sucked into it, and it's frustrating because my wife will say the same thing to me. She'll be like, hey, you're kind of zombieing out. You're a trans. Be present with us. And it's frustrating because I'm like, yeah, no, I am present with you, but you're watching a show. So why is your screen legitimate and my screen is not? Like I don't choose to follow a storyline over a 30-minute, episode of something. I'm choosing to enjoy these little punctuated, entertainment nodules on Twitter or on Reddit. And sometimes I feel frustrated with that because I'm like, well, if my screen was up on a wall and was, 40 inches, then what I'm doing is fine and I'm present in the room. And so I don't know, I get resentful about it. And she says it to me all the time. Like she doesn't say this insecure stuff of like, what's on your phone? Who are you texting? Which would be like, you're on Reddit. And I can hear it in her voice. Yeah, I am. It's like, or sometimes she'll go, are you doing work stuff?
And I get the work stuff thing.
Yeah. And like, I don't want to lie. So I'm like, no. then I'm like really resentful.
Yeah.
But Nick, you've worked a lot with technology,
Okay,
addiction.
Yeah, so here's what I want to do for this one, because this is a really good question. And this is something I think is going to become a bigger issue as time goes on. But I can kind of divide this into two parts, two issues potentially. Okay. There is the issue of being on the phone, which is one. Then there's the issue about the needy remarks. Yeah. So let's take the needy remarks thing. Let's put that on the back burner for right now. Okay. Let's talk just for a second about the relationship thing, about the being on the phone. Okay. Because you almost had me sold, Jim, on your argument, because that's a solid
my TV
argument.
Thing?
Yes.
Yeah, thank
you. Like, why does the size of the screen matter?
Yeah. Yeah.
Why is that more important than what I have in front of me?
Yeah. If I didn't have my head tipped down looking at it, you'd be cool with this.
Here's where I'm probably going to take your wife's side.
Okay. I'm prepared. This is intervention. There is no podcast, is there? This is all just an intervention?
Yeah. All right, everybody, come on.
What the hell, Scott? You were in on this?
So honestly, I think what this has to do with is it's a connection to another person. Where your argument breaks down is if you're both watching TV, there's still the connection because you're both actively doing the same thing. Right. As opposed to you substitute TV and whatever you're doing for two other activities, and it's the same issue. So for example, at my house, I may be sitting in the same room as my girlfriend, but maybe I'm practicing piano or I'm playing guitar or I'm doing something like that. Right. And she's off, reading or doing something else. There's no, even though we're in the same presence, there's no actual
shared
connection.
Activity. Right. I hear you.
So I think that's kind of what the issue is with the phones, in that when it was just TV, there was still that connectedness because we were doing the same thing.
We're both watching
Phones have separated it.
Right.
And so now you do your thing, she does her thing, and there's no real connection. Yeah. So I would say my feedback to this would be to really work on setting some time in your day where you can just have just that connectedness, if that means, having time with no technology or, having a rule that when you eat dinner, there's no technology or something like that.
That's actually a really good note. I want to second that. I think that having a tech-free time where we agree, hey, from 5 o'clock to 6:30, we put our phones on the chargers and we don't grab them. Let's just interact. Let's go back to the awkward silences of, watching the commercials or eating grapes and just talking or having a glass of wine. That is great advice, and I agree. I'm still going to be slightly defensive, but hear me out. Because I've seen people that post these pictures on Reddit that say, oh, all those darn millennials, ignoring each other in the same room. And it's a picture from the 1920s of a bunch of guys on a train reading newspapers and not saying a word to each other. Yeah. So I feel like it is humanity to, kind of want to pivot away and to be in a room of others and be doing your own thing. And I feel like we need to be careful not to criminalize that just because of this new technology. And new technology always gets seen as suspect, right? Because everybody the boob tube, TV was like all these kids, on their TV. And back in my day, we used to do hooping a stick, and like we all just go outside and play in the dirt. And like, yes, but, back in my dad's day, it was comic books. It was like, oh, you kids and your comic books, and so I don't know. I feel like anytime humans trance out into something that's not part of their situational awareness, we can feel bothered by that, ignored by that, which is, I think, genuinely a fair thing. I think you could replace phone with book. My wife's reading books when she gets home. That's what she wants to do, and I feel ignored by her. Replace that. And I think it comes back to Nick's advice is still completely correct. What does it mean to budget some time to say, this is engagement time? Yep. Now, to the second item. Let's pull that other thing off the back burner. The other thing that you said is the needy remarks. Yeah. Getting jealous. So I would encourage you, listener, to take a look at that. Yeah. Really take an honest look at that and kind of ask yourself, what's behind that? What is supporting, what's going on there? Because obviously there's something that you're feeling about that. And that feeling is based off of some kind of
belief system.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if that belief system is a healthy belief system, or maybe this could be harmful to the relationship.
Well, let me get to the point here, because Nick's being very therapeutic.
I'm being.
let me get to the point. You're insecure and you're acting jealous, okay? And you're acting a little paranoid. And who are you texting? What are you doing? She's so interested in her phone that there's a concern of like there's somebody on the other side of this.
Sure.
There's a guy that she's talking to.
Sure.
I think that's what Nick's kind of trying to hint at here. So I'm just going to come right out and say it. That's probably – now maybe that's not it. But asking who are you texting, and those sound needy and jealous. I mean, those are your words, not ours. I think that you need to take a look at that, because here's a rule of thumb I tell couples all the time. If you're feeling insecure or jealous about your mate and you're concerned about who they're talking to, it's okay to express that. It's okay to say, hey, this is some of my truth. I do need to be a little bit reassured because I don't think we have some trust. Okay, cool. Talk about it, flesh it out. And they're allowed to be bothered by that. And they're allowed to say, that's annoying to me. I'm not attracted to you when you're insecure and jealous. Okay, but let's continue to have this dynamic conversation, right? Yep. But the thing I always remind the person about is there are so many billions of humans on this earth. You have to be likable, and you have to be the one they choose pretty much every day, because there's always alternatives. So there is no such thing as playing defense in relationships where you can stop them from ever meeting another person at a coffee shop, being hit on, especially if you're a guy and you're dating a good-looking girl. She's going to be hit on a million times, and she's got to choose you. So invest in you and invest in that relationship. There is no ability to like grab her phone and figure out who she's talking to. So I would just encourage you, don't allow your mind to go down that road too far, because there isn't such thing as defense. You can't play it.
Yeah, I like that. I like that, just that saying there's no playing defense in relationships. No. I would agree with that. 100%.
You can't do it. So you just have to be the best version of you. And if you're concerned, bring it up. But try not to bring it up in an insecure kind of way, because that is not very attractive and it shows weakness. And, I don't mean to play into stereotypes, but I don't encourage it. I think you can approach and say, hey, let's have some engagement time. Let's take away the phones. But, if you're worried they're texting somebody else, ask them.
Right. And it would be interesting to look at, just taking care of that first issue, how that would affect the second.
Let's start there.
Yeah, having good quality time together. Maybe that will decrease some of your insecurity about who she's talking to.
That's a great point. Start there. Mm-hmm. And if that helps, great. And if not, go get a marriage and family counselor.
Yep.
Great question. Thank you so much for submitting that. And now we have one that I am really excited to tear into. Is my husband having an emotional affair? Is my husband having an emotional affair? My husband and I are in our mid-30s, married for 6 years, together for 10 years. We had sort of drifted apart, not communicating well, becoming self-absorbed. We're still having fun and stuff, but I guess we weren't connecting emotionally. During this time, he got really close to an ex-colleague of his who he would chat with all day, meet multiple times a week, even stay out drinking with her till 2 or 3 at night in bars. Initially, I was okay with it. I even met her a couple of times. Maybe, in fact, tried to act too cool with it. Oh, you're going out drinking with her? Go ahead. You guys will talk work. I'll just get bored. That kind of thing. He thought she was really fun. He loved her attitude to life, and he kept saying that he had a real connection with her. She, too, has been going through major marriage problems. I brought up a few times how much he was overdoing communicating with her, and slowly, very slowly, he started setting boundaries, like no calling, no texting her while he and I are together, and no talking about our relationship problems with her, etc. This weekend I was away, and he ended up spending pretty much every evening with her, which he had told me he was going to do. But then on the last day, I was messaging him, and he didn't reply. So I called him at 12 at night, and he was being vague about where he was, and then I realized he was with her at a restaurant. The friend I was traveling with saw me crying, and she threw out the word emotional affair. I looked it up, and it seems like all the classic signs are there, except for maybe the sexual fantasizing and attraction. But now that I think about it, I know that he and she have discussed sexual issues, and things like sexual incompatibility and things that he fantasizes about and would like to try in bed. But he has categorically told me that he does not find her hot or attractive. Is my husband having an emotional affair, or am I overreacting?
Wow.
Huge.
Deep.
Great question.
Yeah.
Real life.
Yeah.
Excited to address this one. So Nick and I have actually, when we were preparing for this, we were taking a look at it, and we intentionally chose not to even discuss it on the car ride or anything because we wanted to make sure that we both came out just with honest,
genuine,
candid,
possible.
Reflection on it. So, Nick, as you hear this, take us through it. What are you thinking? What are the mechanics of this? What can you say about it?
So there's a lot of parts that I can relate to that I think you can make the argument that this is kind of an innocent thing, and I can relate to a lot of that. But there's other things in here that are kind of red flags.
Okay.
So let me explain a little bit. So I have a lot of female friends, and I communicate with them, text back and forth, but there are times in a relationship that can be a problem.
Sure.
The other part to this, too, is that when I was going through my divorce, there was a lot of people who came out of the woodwork to support me. People who I didn't even realize I was that close of friends with, but, they dropped everything to come out and help. And it was amazingly beneficial. I could not have gotten through that if it wasn't for this group of friends. And I realized that I'm never going to be able to pay them back for that. So I kind of made a commitment to myself that if I can't pay them back for what they did, then I'll pay it forward. So when I have a friend or a coworker or somebody who is going through something very difficult, I will, be the support to that person that these other people were to me. That was kind of the commitment that I made, right? And so in doing that, I have had some friends who were going through some challenging times, and I made a really strong effort to be available and be supportive. But then there's that other part too, where you have to balance your regular life. And if you're in a relationship, you have to set some really clear boundaries. A big thing is, time of day. If people are texting late at night, and I'm in a relationship, if it makes my significant other uncomfortable, then I need to make that, I have to be respectful of that. And I have to start setting some clear boundaries about, what is okay and what isn't. And you can kind of do that by just not responding at certain times, and it's hard sometimes to kind of find that balance between being helpful, being supportive, but yet still setting some clear boundaries.
Right.
There's a lot of things in here, though, that really...
red flags.
Yeah.
And one of the things I hear you saying is I kind of relate to the female in this one. I relate to the person who has... Or no, the male. I relate as somebody who's had good connections with females, but it's honestly innocent. Even if I am talking to them quite a bit, it is innocent, but it can be confusing.
Right. And it's like certain topics. Like with my female friends, I don't get into detail talking about like sexual fantasies or incompatibilities in bed or anything like that.
It feels like that's too far.
Yeah, that feels like that would be crossing a line.
Sure.
And then the other part too, where she was saying that she could tell that he was kind of being a little standoffish, not really wanting to answer questions.
Yeah.
Well, part of that could be because he is now aware that this is bothering her and he doesn't want to upset her.
Sure.
But also, it kind of sounds like either that or he's hiding something. That could go either way.
So let me weigh in on some of this. And I appreciate those thoughts. I think it's candid. I think it's honest. My take on it is, frankly, yes. Is my husband having an emotional affair? Yes. I think this is the definition of what I understand an emotional affair to be. Where I see the writer getting confused as she says, well, hold on. Like, when I ask him, are you sexually attracted to her? He says no. So therefore, none of this can be real. That is a misconception about how relationships work. There's a great book out there called His Needs, Her Needs. And, it has flaws, but I think it provides a really interesting conversation starter. And in the book, it identifies 5 different areas that each gender specifically tends to have. These are just patterns. These are need categories that, if they are unmet, a person will begin looking to meet that need somewhere else. And it doesn't matter, how important each need is to them. If you leave one of them uncovered long enough, they will seek outside nourishment of that need. And that will result in what we call an affair. And the word affair means an entanglement of intimacy with somebody other than your partner, right? That's what it is. It doesn't matter the nature of that. But when the author talks about his needs, the male needs, he talks about 5 of them. Some of them are obvious, but I'm going to read them all. The first one is sexual fulfillment. The second one is recreational companionship, which means like the ability to enjoy your mate, play with them, go out and do things, feel like you have fun together. The third thing is being attractive, so he needs the sense that his mate is attractive. The fourth is domestic support, which can mean just feeling like being near her is safe and she makes my world homey in a sense. Doesn't mean like decorates the walls, but it means like I feel supported by her in a human home base kind of sense. And the last one is affirmation, which a lot of people don't understand. That is a male need, and a lot of men need affirmation. And what's interesting is there's a quiz you can take that actually tells you what is your primary, secondary, third, fourth, fifth needs? And you look at these like, how long can you go without this being met before you'll look for it elsewhere? And ironically, most of the men that I've done this quiz with, you'd think that their first need is going to be sexual fulfillment, or maybe their first need is going to be knowing my mate's attractive. It's usually affirmation. Usually men tend to say, as they do the whole review, it's feeling like I'm admired and feeling like I'm respected and thinking my mate actually thinks I'm a catch, like that's really
That doesn't
valuable.
surprise me at all, actually.
Right, but it surprises a lot of women
Yeah.
because women think, men are these strong guys. They don't care what anybody think, but they like attractive women and they like having sex. That is a great image that we have managed as a franchise to put out there, but men are actually terribly fragile and they have very gentle egos and so they need this affirmation. So comparing the 5 needs to this story, to the writer, I see in this scenario that your husband is seeking affirmation and recreational companionship from somebody else. And that is beginning to create a situation in which she is meeting an outside need. And so he is leaving the relationship to meet a need. Now, is he a criminal? Should you break up with him? Not necessarily. But let's call this what it is. There are emotional components of your life that she is now meeting. In Nick's scenario, he's talking about when a friend has a need, I am being a good friend and assisting them with their problem. That's like if you're good at fixing cars and somebody calls you and says, my brakes are broken, you come over and help them. I spent 10 hours at their house, but I was fixing something, right? That's different than this guy seeking nourishment from this person perpetually. He's having something in his life addressed by his relationship with her. And the fact that that relationship is now including conversations about sexual fantasy, incompatibilities, here's my problems at home, that's beginning to tell me, and this is what Nick's referring to as red flags, that's showing me that this is now becoming more and more intimate, more and more familiar. But what a lot of people don't understand is that an affair doesn't have to be sexual for it to occur. I had a couple once where the guy would come home every day and he'd play video games. He'd get on his Xbox and he'd play video games, and these were online. He ended up suddenly and very quickly leaving his wife, and she was blown away. And she's like, oh my gosh, we're getting a divorce. What's going on? He says, I've fallen in love with somebody else. She says, who could you have possibly fallen in love with? You come home every day. You don't talk to anybody else. What are you talking about? He fell in love with somebody he was playing video games with. There was a female who lived down the street, and they found each other online, and they would play the same video games. And over the time of that relationship, she was meeting his recreational companionship need. Every day he looked forward to talking to her, to playing with her. That was his friend. And he slowly fell in love with her. Even though the other needs were being met by his wife, that one need wasn't. And so he outsourced it. And over time, that created the emotional entanglement that led to an actual affair and led to him actually divorcing his wife and pursuing that other relationship. Now, whether that worked out or not, I don't know. But I know that that was enough to break the dam and have the water spill out.
Right. Well, now that we've scared the living hell out of our listener,
Yeah.
what advice do you have for her?
So I would okay, so I think that you're starting to engage your husband and you're saying, hey, I am uncomfortable with this. Let's discuss it. I would honestly, I would recommend the book His Needs, Her Needs. I really would. I believe it's by Dr. Harley. And I would recommend picking it up because it discusses in depth how feminine and masculine needs exist and how we as a couple sometimes just think, well, I'm just going to deal with, having sex with you or whatever. But to actually discuss what are my needs, how does this coworker, this ex-coworker somehow touch some of these needs? And if I'm your wife, I want to be the one that addresses these needs. If you have a friend on the outside, fine, but that should look an awful lot more like a friendship
Right.
than you're dating. right? And right now, by all appearances, it looks like an emotional affair. So being able to label that, call that what it is without being accusatory, having a shared definition of what that means, having a basic text like his needs, her needs to reference together and have a discussion about it is important. But coming back to this, the husband is now defensive.
Right.
There's a reason for that. Another thing they talk about in the book is love capital. Think about it like a bank account. Over time, this other person had a zero balance. And now as she conversates with him more and more and enjoys him more and more and affirms him more and is there for him more and he tells his secrets to her more and more, she's earning an account balance in his love bank. And so dollar by dollar, her account's going up. If the day comes that she has a higher account than you, or it is comparable, he will have a divided allegiance in his heart. Because through no fault of his own, it will appear to him, somehow he has real feelings for this other person, and they actually matter to him. And it will feel like betrayal to ask him to put that person aside and focus only on you. Mm-hmm. So that love bank concept is there because your balance could be going up and down, and this other person's balance is only going up because they don't have any real world responsibilities to him to actually have crises and put him down or whatever, let him down. So it's a dangerous crisis. I would want to get ahead of it. I want to challenge you guys to take a look at that book together and have a frank and honest conversation about, does this person have an account in your love bank? Are you willing to challenge that with me? Because if your account is still much higher than theirs, he's probably willing to talk to you. But if he's already starting to have divided allegiance, this may get to the place where you guys need to invite a therapist into this.
Yeah. Okay. Very good.
Hard truth, tough talk.
Yep.
But also, it doesn't help to be accusatory. It doesn't help to get out there and, just say, oh my gosh, you're a villain. You've done these terrible things. But it is fair for you to talk about your truth. This hurts me. This emotionally touches me. And I want to have it change. And I think that this is something that you can address. So I encourage you to do that. Get out there and talk about it. And if you're out there today as a listener and you suspect that maybe you've encountered an emotional affair, or even how the phone impacts this, what is an affair these days? If you're always talking to the same couple of people online, and what does that look like? That's a fair question to ask. And I strongly encourage you to write into the show. Let us take an examinative approach to it. And if we can, we'll give you some honest feedback, and hopefully it's helpful.
Definitely. Thanks for writing in.
Very good. All right, that's all the time we've got for this week's session. Thank you to those who contributed to our show today. We really appreciate it. Remember, pod therapy isn't something you should keep all to yourself. Help us reach others by sharing this episode. You can find us at facebook.com/podtherapy or on Twitter @podtherapyguys.
Do you have any advice you'd like to give to today's questions? Post your thoughts at podtherapy.net and join the conversation. I'm Nick Tangeman.
I'm Jim Jobin.
Thanks, and we'll see you for your appointment next week.